Following is a presentation of the Oregon Resources Research and Education Center.
Well, hello, I'm Frank Burris. I'm with Oregon State University. I've been here, my wife and I have been here about 15 years. I'm a watershed agent, extension agent. And in 2007, I took over the staff chair responsibilities, the director of the local office here in Curry County. And most recently now I'm interim regional manager for the North Coast counties. So it's been a learning process being part of extension here, but one of my passions is science education, and one of the reasons is probably most of you know that 2 years ago a student that graduated valedictorian of our school here in Curry County was unable to get into the college of her choice. The school didn't accept her. And she was the best and the brightest that we have to offer here in Curry County. And one of the reasons that that's happened, and one of the reasons I think it's happened, is because we've gone through a transition in Gold Beach and in Curry County in general, so all of Southern Oregon, from a natural resource-based economy to a tourism-based economy. So what does that have to do with the kids having good skills in school? Well, students are attracted to what they see around them, to people that are being successful in their careers and their fields. And before the Northwest Forest Plan came in, we had scientists and researchers here. The Gold Beach office, the Forest Service office, used to have 40 scientists in that office. We now have 6. And so the students that used to be mentored by these scientists, and we had guest lectures and presentations in school. They interacted with those scientists on a daily basis, and they would see successful people that were working in very heady sciences, very creative scientific endeavors. And with the Northwest Forest Plan, we basically stopped managing forests, in federal forests in Curry County. And so we successively reduced back the number of scientists that it's taken to manage those forests, and now we're down to just a handful of people. And they don't have time to go to the schools and do presentations. They don't mentor students anymore. And you know, our science used to be a powerhouse here. Does anybody remember that? We sent kids to the state science fair every year. We sent kids to the national science fair 3 times in the first 5 years I was here. And we sent one kid to the international science fair who won a medal at an international science fair in 2002. Yet we don't do that anymore. Why not? Because those kids don't see scientists on a daily basis. They don't see that as a career that would be something that they could invest their lives in, that a creative use of their time and their energy. And so I began about 10 years ago researching ways to get youth involved in science again. I visited 8 or 10 very creative centers in a period of about 3 or 4 years. Well, I found the perfect model, and it's something that I want to export. I found it in Maine, Portland, Maine, and I want to export it from Portland and import it to Curry County. And that model is a model and let me just describe it to you. The Gulf of Maine has had a cod issue. They used to produce billions of tons of cod out of the Gulf of Maine every year, and then that fishery collapsed. And so they spent a whole bunch of science, people and money trying to figure out what happened to that fishery. Well, they figured it out, and in the process they created a research center right on the Gulf of Maine that focuses on cod recovery in the Gulf of Maine. Well, about a third of this research center is dedicated to youth education. So what they do is they bring in one time a year every 5th grader in the state of Maine. Every single 5th grader in the whole state goes through this facility. And the way they do it is they have corporate sponsors that buy buses. And the day I was there, the bus that delivered the kids there was sponsored by a company, Poland Springs. You're familiar with the water company, Poland Springs? Well, the bus was painted just like a water bottle. It looked like a water bottle driving down the highway. But that was their corporate sponsorship. That they owned that bus, and they used that bus to transport kids to this facility. So the kids would come into the facility, they'd give them a question. And the question that they were trying to answer when I was there is what happened to the cod in the Gulf of Maine. The kids are put in groups, and they go out and they develop hypotheses, trying to figure out what could have possibly happened. And they have kiosks that they go to, and each one of these kiosks has a different piece of information about the cod and about cod recovery. And so they go to those kiosks, and with their question, they decide whether their question really fits. Does the information I'm getting from this kiosk answer my question or not? And they can go around, and by the end of the morning, they have a pretty good idea of what happened to the cod and whether their hypothesis of what happened to them is supported or not. And then the key is that they break for lunch. The key is at the end of the day, each one of those groups gets up and does a presentation to their peers. So the group does a presentation telling about what their hypothesis was, how they figured out whether it was supported or not by the data, and what they think the problem is at the end. And it was absolutely incredible what these fifth graders were coming out with. It was inquiry-based science. It was a chance for them to do their own science. And you know, if you ask a dozen people what the important things of science are, what do you get? When you learn science, what did you learn? You learn facts and figures. But that's not what science is. Somebody used a hypothesis and creative science to figure out that fact and figure. All you're doing is you're learning the very end of the process. You don't learn the process that led up to that fact or figure. And that's the creative part of science. Let me give you a little idea about my science background, and you'll understand a little better kind of where I'm coming from. I grew up the son of a world-renowned wildlife biologist, and I always wanted to be a biologist. Yet when I got to school, number one, I was a pretty lackluster student, but number two, science, just memorizing facts and figures, bored me to tears. And so I questioned whether that was what I really wanted to do or not. I graduated from high school, barely. The only reason I got into college was because the state I lived in was required to take students for at least one semester from that state. Otherwise, I never would have even gotten into college. I scrambled my way through college, and I managed to graduate with a bachelor's degree. And some people graduate summa cum laude, and some people graduate magna cum laude, and I graduated thank the laude. And when I got out from my bachelor's degree, still with a bachelor's degree in science now, still having done no science. I learned all about science, but I hadn't done any science. And when I got out, there wasn't a market for biologists at the time. There was a glut of biologists coming out of school, and I couldn't get a job, and so I just stayed back in for a master's degree. And when I did science for the first time. Do you realize I've been to how many years of school from kindergarten through a bachelor's degree, and I never did science? But when I did my master's degree, I actually had to develop a hypothesis and read the literature and find out how it was supported and figure out what the questions were and what the answers were that needed to be answered and design studies to answer those questions. And it turned me on to science. That's when I became a scientist, is doing my master's degree. And I realized, man, why didn't I learn that when I was a second grader? You know? Why didn't I learn it when it could influence my education all the way up through? And ever since then, I've been dedicated to trying to get kids to understand that science is way more than just facts and figures. Those are just the end of the study. But the study leading up to that, the answering the questions, that's the creative part of science, and that's the fun part. So what we've done is with my input and a board that we've created, we've developed the Oregon Resources Research and Education Center. And we've modeled it after that Gulf of Maine Research Institute, where kids will come into that center and learn about science, and we'll have an inquiry-based education system. So they actually come in, get a question, and have to go around to different kiosks and answer that question throughout the day, exactly like they do at Gulf of Maine. And the way we're going to fund that is very creatively. We're going to use the Research Center to fund the Education Center. And we're going to have an interpretive center so that we can actually attract more people here and increase the economy of Curry County in the process. So the part that we're working with is we're working with the Oregon Sea Grant group. Anyone familiar with Sea Grant? A couple people are. Sea Grant is, of course, the land grant university. The university's given land, and they manage that land, and that actually helps them lower the tuition rates at the school. Well, Oregon State is that university. Well, Oregon State is also the headquarters of Sea Grant, which is a NOAA-funded portion. Sea Grant is the ones doing all the creative work at Hatfield Marine Science Center. Anyone visited Hatfield? Hatfield's a really cool place, and they have a group there called the Free Choice Learning Group. And what that group does is it's a bunch of graduate students and a professor that research how people interact with displays. So when you go into Hatfield, you sign a release that they can do research on you. And when you go in there, all you do is you're looking around, and there's a graduate student kind of hovering over you, and he's checking off, how much time you spend with something, what knobs you fiddle with, and how you're interacting with this display. Because they're trying to improve the way people get information from displays. So the Free Choice Learning Group has agreed to work with us on this interpretive center down here to actually help us improve the education that kids get from that inquiry-based education system. It's a real huge benefit. It's a great group, collaborative group, and it'll help us put our educational program together. We're also going to have researchers at that facility, and those researchers are going to be high-quality researchers researching local natural resource issues. So we anticipate things like looking at water quality issues from logging, looking at how to use alternative forest products, and developing new ways to get funding from forest products, researching nearshore fisheries work, groundfish fisheries. So we're going to provide a place for those researchers to do their work, to have labs and office facilities for them. And in the process, those researchers will give back to the community by being guest lecturers in school, and by being mentors for students with science fair projects, and doing education in the community, workshops for the community, and providing opportunity for community members to volunteer in their labs so they can really find out what science is all about if they have time to do those volunteer work. And the greatest thing is that our children are going to have the opportunity to really see how science works, and to see scientists doing science, instead of just learning facts and figures about science. So the other thing is that ORIC is going to enhance the local economy. By having all those scientists here, they're going to be spending money at the gas stations and the grocery stores, and doing fishing charters and jet boat trips, and playing golf, and the recreational opportunities.